Hello YouTubers, let's talk about the Cold War Volume 2 and briefly speak about some of the things that were going on during the Cold War and their effects mainly in Europe and the United States. So the United States and the Soviet Union had very different plans for how to rebuild European countries, and basically it was a competition between the United States and the USSR for influence in countries that were in Europe that were rebuilding from war. So the USSR was attempting as much as they could to gain land and influence in areas outside of what was Russia and create this Soviet empire. So it was no longer Russia, it was the United Soviet Socialist Republic, the USSR, and they claimed land in what was called the Eastern Bloc. So the Eastern Bloc was a group of countries who had been influenced after the war by the USSR and therefore had aspects of communism and were controlled in many ways by the USSR. So this included Poland, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, and Hungary. And the United States feared that communism would spread, and so they wanted to be able to battle that force, that communist force, and the power of the USSR, and so they adopted what was called the Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was money from the United States that would aid in the rebuilding of these countries that had been devastated by war, both economically and politically. So as a result, the Marshall Plan would give U.S. money and aid to those countries in return for basically these countries using democratic and capitalist principles and not being communist. That was the most important part. So the Marshall Plan was an attempt to stop the Soviets from expanding even further into Western Europe, which the Eastern Bloc had allowed them to do. Now there's two other big alliance systems that were made after World War II, and this was NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was the United States led, and democratic nations signed on to basically agree to militarily support one another and to support democratic freedoms. That NATO quickly prompted the USSR to form what was called the Warsaw Pact, which was communist countries coming together in an alliance to defend each other, and kind of represented the potential for this Cold War to become a very heated war. And nobody really wanted that, because both of these sides now, the United States and the USSR, very rapidly had both developed nuclear capabilities and would destroy each other. So very early on in the Cold War, Stalin died. He died in 1953, and he died and was an extremely paranoid and what can we say? He was so paranoid as a leader that he would kill and repress any kind of opposition, even imagined opposition within his own party and within his nation. And so people were kind of tired of living in fear of Stalin, and so his successor was Nikita Khrushchev, and Nikita Khrushchev adopted or promised to bring less, I don't know if barbaric is the right word, but a kinder, gentler form of communism to the people. And he was very gregarious. He was kind of a funny guy. He was good in front of the camera. He was very spirited and lively. And so he quickly became, and he kind of shot off his mouth an awful lot, which made a lot of people like him. And so Nikita Khrushchev was bringing a new form of communism to the USSR, but in reality, not a whole lot was changing as far as the makeup of the country and politically and economically what was really going on. So the Cold War continued until the late 80s, when it reached a head as the Berlin Wall was toppled in Germany, and we'll talk about that in kind of our next couple of units. But basically the Soviet Union was not able to hold on to their communist empire, and the United States and the democracies were, and so the Cold War ended basically with this symbol of the Cold War falling down and being crumbled, in fact, broken down by the people of Germany who wanted to unite Germany again. And the East Germans were clearly behind the West Germans in a lot of ways. Economically, they had not gotten as far as the West Germans had, and so Germany now has made a remarkable recovery and is doing extremely well as far as nations go, and they're using a liberal democracy, which is what the United States pushed for during the Cold War. So that's kind of more Cold War in a nutshell. I'm not going to go over any other major vocabulary or words, but we'll talk a little bit more about the Cold War in Asia in our upcoming videos. It'd be awesome.